Hey there. All right, so you're looking for budgeting? Okay, so let's have a look at the FCAC's budgeting planner. Now, the really cool thing about this tool is that it is provided by the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, which is a government agency. They have absolutely no ads whatsoever. It's 100% free. They're not selling you anything whatsoever. So I really like it for that particular reason. There are many different budgeting planners out there, but this is probably one of my favorite ones. So let's have a very quick look at actually how this works. So you can either download a copy of this onto your own machine or keep it all online. So some people are like, oh, well, if I keep it all online, won't the government kind of know what I'm doing? Oh, honestly, I don't think they're actually monitoring this stuff, but just in case they do, you can always just download it, and I'll show you in a second how to do that. Now, before we get started, the very first thing that you want to do is basically answer these 5 questions. Now, the reason why it asks you these particular questions is in order to be able to fully customize your specific version of the budget itself, right? So obviously answer whatever situation actually applies to your circumstances there. So I'm going to go single. Let's say I'm totally in the 18 to 24. I mean, just look at me. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Let's just say I'm a student, and let's say I'm renting, and let's say this is, I'm just creating my very first budget, but obviously select whatever else actually applies to your situation there. And I'm going to click on start. Now, it is entirely up to you whether you want to start filling out the budgeting information online on the website, or whether you just want to download the Excel spreadsheet and do it on your own computer. So if you want to download the spreadsheet, click on these 3 little lines, click on export. That will generate this Excel spreadsheet here. Notice that the spreadsheet itself right now is empty because I haven't entered anything online. Had I already started pre-entering some of the information online, when you save it, it saves it with all the information that you've already pre-entered. So it's entirely up to you what you want to do. Now, the really cool thing about this is that as you're entering the information, not only are you able to select the frequency of payments and so on and so forth, but on the right hand side, the more information you enter and the more graphs will be generated. Some of those graphs are basic graphs showing you how much your income is versus how much your expenses are over here, and you'll have a pie chart over here showing you exactly how your money is divided into what different subsections and subcategories. But it'll also compare you with whatever the average Canadian is spending on those particular subsections, and basically you'll see, am I spending more or am I spending less compared to the average person on, let's say, food, insurance, and so on and so forth. So it's a very useful little thing because, people love to compare themselves to others. It's just kind of a human thing to do. Now, the more information you provide the model, and the more likely it is to be able to provide you some useful suggestions as well in the second tab over here. Okay, so I'll show you exactly how that works in a second. The exact same stuff is available to you online. So I'm going to show you how to fill out the online version just because it's a bit more visually appealing, but the Excel spreadsheet is the exact same thing as well. Okay. All right, so very quickly. And by the way, if you're doing it online, don't forget to click on the save button over here and then save your key somewhere. Okay, so that way you can access it again online. And if after you fill that out online, you save it as an Excel spreadsheet, at the very top here, you'll also have the link to your own personalized version of the online budget. Right? Now, keep in mind, whenever you're afterwards editing this version of it, the Excel spreadsheet, it won't update the online version. Okay, you can just work on the online version and then download the updated version of the Excel spreadsheet from online if you want, or just update the spreadsheet here. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so let me show you how to use it online. So in this case, the very first subsection here asks us about our net income. All right, so in this case, let's say that I'm a student that gets paid annually $20,000. Okay, just to make the math simple. And just like that, it tells you exactly how much you're making at the top over here and also at the bottom. The reason it mentions in 2 different places is because this bar at the bottom, if you're fortunate enough to have multiple sources of income, you can keep on adding different items. So let's say you're also driving Uber part-time on a weekly basis. You're making $50. I don't know. So you see, now it added that subsection as well. And you can also break it down by looking at it in greater detail here. It shows you exactly where your income is coming from. So that's that. If at any point in time you're a bit uncertain what is net income, what's employee insurance, etc., just keep your mouse over the little question marks and it'll give you a more thorough explanation. All right. So the very next step is savings. So that's what I really like about this particular budgeting tool, is because a lot of times when people fail at budgeting, they're thinking about savings as, well, you know what, if at the end of the month I have like a few dollars left over, I'll put those aside. No. savings should be thought of as an investment in your future self or a bill to your future self. Now, I would say start with a reasonable sum. So it's a good idea typically to track your expenses for at least a month, ideally 1 to 3 months before you actually set everything up, because then you have a better idea in terms of how much money you reasonably can afford to set up. But here I'm going to say, let's pretend I actually did this for a month and I was able to have $50 left over last month. So this month I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to aim at saving at least $50. And if I have anything left over at the end of this month, I'll set that one aside as well. I'll add that to it. Okay. Then we go to the expenses subsection. Now notice that there's a lot of different expenses and every single one of these expenses has different subsections over here. So if that's a bit overwhelming, you can limit the number of overall categories by clicking on a little eyeball over here and then basically removing any of the categories that don't necessarily apply to your specific situation. For example, notice what's going to happen to the housing over here if I'm deselecting it here. You see it disappears. So let's say I'm going to keep all of these, but I don't have any pets, so I'm going to remove the pet subsection over there. Again, do as you will with your own specific circumstances. Now, important thing to note. When they're talking about the debt repayment category, which is the very first section in the expenses category, they're talking about debt that you haven't been able to pay off in full by the end of the month. If this month you've spent $500 on your credit card on groceries, don't enter that as credit card debt. It's not yet credit card debt. Why? Well, because had I paid, let's say, $500 cash, right, you wouldn't consider that being credit card debt, right? So there's no difference between me paying with a credit card or paying cash if and only if I'm able to pay off that credit card in full 1 or 2 business days before the due date. So in that case, if I was able to pay it off in full, don't set it up as in the section of debt here, but put it under the section of actual food. So again, $500. Make sure that you select the correct time frame. So in this case, monthly, and there you go. Now we're back in green. That's perfect. So there you go. So now we spend this much money on food. Now, next step, again, if you don't have any actual credit card debt or anything like that, go to housing. Let's say your monthly rent is, I don't know, I'm going to make some numbers up. Let's say you're paying $1,400, but you happen to have a roommate, so you're spending $700 each. Okay, so it tells you get this amount is slightly above the range of 35%, which is the recommended amount per month. Okay, so again, it keeps you informed about how you're doing relative to what the national average is supposed to be. Do you have any tenant insurance? Let's say you pay $20. Obviously, I'm just going to enter random numbers here, but enter whatever actually is relevant to you specifically. Let's assume that water and heating is included in that particular rental. All right, now I'm just going to fast forward by filling out everything else, and I'll see you in a second with the final results. All right, so as you can see here, we have a leftover monthly balance of $5.82. Not too bad. So we can add that to the $50 at the end of the month if that's what we can do. And here we have the breakdown of how much we're spending on food, how much we're spending on housing, education, and so on and so forth in my example. And then again, it shows you how you stack up against the Canadian average for those specific subcategories. You can see in some of them, we're spending a bit more than the average or quite a bit more than the average over there. In other cases, we might be spending less. If at the very end you want to save it as an Excel spreadsheet, simply go to export, and then this is what it looks like. Everything is already pre-entered for you at this point in time. And same thing, you have the suggestions on this side. But keep in mind, all of this stuff you can do while entering all that information manually on the Excel spreadsheet. You don't need to do it first on the website. I'm just saying you have both options available to you. Hope you found this useful. Have a good one.